Hello, everybody. I am Christy Craig. I'm the publisher here at Hidden Timber Books, and I want to welcome you again to a small press author reading series. This one is really special. It's a great collection montage of readers and books. One of them is our debut author, Lyndsey Ellis, who has written Bone Broth, which has just come out recently. And she's going to be reading with Glodean champion, author of Salmon Croquettes, and Mahogany Browne, author of Chlorine Sky. This is a great trio of books to have. There's a lot of themes in common. So today we're going to hear from each author and talk a little bit about their books and the themes and the influence of regional history on young women and young girls and older women, as in Bone Broth, and just yeah, talk about all those different things that I think are going to be really exciting. So just to give you a little bit of information about this small press author reading series, it's been a great event that we've done for a little over a year. We're kind of winding down here for a bit of respite in the summer as things open up around us and people really want to get outside. But all of the past readings are online at our Hidden Timber Books YouTube channel. You can go through 2020 and 2021 events, and we'll be back up in the fall with a lot more authors, a lot more books to check out, and some great events. So let's get this one started. Thank you so much for being here on a Sunday afternoon. I am going to introduce you first to Lyndsey Ellis. Again, she is the author of Bone Broth. All these books have really cool covers, and this one we were excited to pull together from the artist Jade the designer. So Lyndsey Ellis is a St. Louis-born fiction writer. She is an essayist and cultural worker with a BA from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and an MFA in writing from California College of the Arts in San Francisco. She strives to explore the intergenerational trauma, hardship, and struggle. Bone Broth is her debut novel, and we could not be more proud to have that in our catalog. So Lyndsey, I would love to pass the baton to you to hear a little bit about your book, hear you read from it, and thanks so much for being here today.
Excellent. Thank you, Christy, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm truly honored to be able to share work along with these ladies, Glodean and Mahogany. So, Bone Broth is basically a book about an elder woman in her community who is actually trying to recover from the death of her husband. So she's newly widowed, and her three kids go along with her in that journey. She's a funeral thief, and she's also a former activist. And so her kids actually unlock, her past, a past that she doesn't really want known about her activism in St. Louis during the 1970s. And it's just funny just to see how it kind of unfolds for her and her children during the book. So I will read a piece of it just so you can get a better understanding of it. Dozens of fire ants marched along Justine's front porch. Their tiny red bodies also filled the spaces between the bricks near the house's exterior doorframe. Lois shoved her spare key into the keyhole. She was sitting on the living room sofa with the Schnucks coupon booklet in her lap. I don't want those pests taking over this house, Justine said. Stunned, Lois wiped the backs of her sandals on the door mat inside the house. She stared at her mother, who was still barely recognizable with her short grayish afro-like hair growing around her full face and now matting at the ends. The house was how it had been left, stuffy and clumsily arranged in the way Justine liked it. Everything hidden to all who entered and findable only by her. The strong, spicy scent of boiling sassafras root struck Lois as she closed the front door behind her. She wanted to be angry, but the lingering smell only made her hungry and nostalgic. She saw herself and her siblings when they were little, running in and out of the kitchen to watch Justine crushing the root bark from Miss Myrtle's backyard sassafras tree and steeping it in boiling water before she combined it with the bone broth she made for them. It was a rare meal in their house. Because of its lengthy cooking time, her mother only made use of the recipe when someone was sick or in danger of getting sick. Justine swore that just a tiny dose of sassafras, along with the medicinal quality of bone broth, could reduce a fever and dislodge mucus. For that reason, Lois found coming down with a head cold or the flu to be a bittersweet experience. She loved the taste of bone broth, how the liquid's thin components soothed her and slowly opened her up as she sipped it down with a spoon or drank it straight from the bowl. It was like she could feel herself healing. As upset as she was at her mother, she was tempted to try the broth now, even if the pregnancy wouldn't let her enjoy the flavor. Where have you been, Mama? Lois didn't wait for Justine to answer. She plowed through the house and into the kitchen, where a large pot of sassafras roots was boiling on the stove. The water in that pot look brown yet? Justine asked, not taking her eyes off the coupon booklet. I know you heard me, Mama. Yes, I did, Justine said. You disappeared and no one could reach you, Lois said to Justine. I came by yesterday and again this morning and you weren't here. We tried your cell phone, we tried Miss Bev, and then Miss Myrtle's house. Nothing. Who was we? Me, Theo, and Raina, your kids. Lies. Justine waved her hand. Raina would never do that. She was concerned. We all were. And really, that's not the point. The question is, where were you and why didn't you tell anyone? The phone rang. Lois watched her mother fumble for the cordless phone in one of the pockets of her housecoat. She motioned for Lois to follow her downstairs into the laundry room. What, son? Lois heard her mother ask as she pulled linen out of the dryer. I'm over here being questioned by your sister right now, the one who still speaks to me. Justine stretched out a towel and began folding it. Boy, don't you start with me too. What is this, 60 minutes? Look, I'll call you back later. Better yet, you call me. She hung up and tossed the phone onto a pile of clothes hangers in the corner of the room. So are you going to tell me? Asked Lois, shaking out a fitted sheet. I went with Rich to see his son in prison. Prison? Lois held a wrinkled sheet to her body as if trying to shield herself from her mother's revelation. Prison, Justine repeated. We went yesterday. They stared at each other, not blinking, until the kitchen refrigerator's smug hum vibrated against the ceiling above them. Mama. Justine's obvious anger caused the skin on her forehead to ripple. Lois, I'm your mother. You don't get to tell me what conversation we can have. You're sounding more like your sister every day. Oh, now I'm like Raina again, said Lois. We've always been two different people, Mama. She's her and I'm me. But since you want to drag Raina into this, I think it's time you two have a little sit down on those old clippings she found of you in Sir's basement. Girl, shut your fool mouth, Justine hissed. I don't have time to explain myself to you and definitely not to her. If she spent half as much time and energy worrying about her own shady past as much as she did mine, she'd be a much happier person. Lois's pulse raced. She felt her blood beat against the skin on her ears. So that was you in the Veil Prophet scandal photo. Stop it. The terror and rage in Justine's voice bounced through the small room. She stood by the dryer, her shaking hands on its top for support. Her shoulders bobbed slowly and then faster. Lois froze at the thought of bringing her mother to tears. Then she heard the woman's fragile cackle. You're a bigger fool than I thought, Justine said over her shoulder. You don't know nothing about nothing. Justine took her time climbing the stairs and left Lois in the laundry room feeling confused. She listened to her mother bang pots against the stovetop and then the clicking sound of the stove's electric igniter sparking the burner. Thank you.
Thank you, Lyndsey. Thanks so much. I love those characters and the relationships that Justine has with her daughters. It'll be interesting to have those discussions about relationships. That's one of the questions that I have down the road. For now, I would like to introduce you all to our next wonderful author. So, Glodean Champion is a coach, a speaker, and storyteller, and can be best described as a Renaissance woman with flair. Her writing has been published in Hip Mama magazine, Exposure, The Womanist, and more. With a BA from Mills College and an MFA from California College of the Arts, she is a Vona Voices and Hurston Wright alum. She lives in Monterey, California, and is working on a sequel to Salmon Croquettes and on a memoir. And this is her great cover for her book. So welcome, Glodean. Thanks so much for being here. I'd love to hear more about your book and hear you read today.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Salmon Croquettes is the
Good.
coming of age story of a young girl who is struggling with her sexuality while growing up in Watts, Los Angeles. And it's set in 1965 because it's also historical fiction about the Watts riots. I am going to read the section of the story where Zayla, my character, gets sent home from school, and they're having dinner that night when her father gets home. I'm home, Daddy called out like he did every night. Where's the love of my life and the apple of my eye? I let the love of his life go to him first so they could get all the hugging and kissing out of the way. Sometimes I wondered if time for them went by in dog years. What felt like 8 hours to me must have been like 56 years to them. They weren't perfect by a long shot, but I know that most of the stuff between them had to do with me and Mama. And sometimes they argued when Mama couldn't contain her jealousy. I waited for Mama to go back into the kitchen, washed up for dinner, and ran to join them. The produce is old when they ship it. I can't even get a good head of cabbage, Mama was saying as I came in. Daddy was in his spot at the kitchen table, flipping through the evening edition of the LA Sentinel newspaper. I sat in my spot right next to him and waited for a break in their conversation. He leaned over and kissed my cheek. Hi, Daddy, I whispered. How's my bug? He whispered back. To Mama, he said, Baby, why don't you just go to farmer's market? Farmer's market? Mama let out a loud snort. The way she was glaring at us, I couldn't tell if she was more disgusted with the idea of farmer's market or the reality of Daddy loving me in spite of her. Not to mention, according to her, the way the white women treated her. I will not drive all the way to 3rd and Fairfax to be insulted. Those silly ass white women staring like they've never seen a Negro before, or assuming every one of us cleans houses and raises their kids for them. Oh, hi, don't you work for? And that kind of shit. No, thank you. She was exaggerating, of course. In truth, the times I went to farmer's market with Mama, those white women looked right through us. I think she just made up that other stuff so Daddy would feel sorry for her. It must have felt a whole lot better than having to admit to being invisible altogether. Zayla, get up and start setting the table. I kissed Daddy's cheek and did as I was told. I think it's time we get out of here before things get worse, Frank. It's not like we can't afford to move to Windsor Hills. I'm not so quick to leave Watts. My roots are here. I was born in this house. So let's not start talking about leaving until we have a good reason. But Frank, listen, that kind of thinking is exactly why our community is falling apart. The minute one of us gets some money, we can't wait to move out and give our money to the white man, live in his neighborhood, shop at his stores. And for what? You don't see them crackers running to Watts to do nothing but listen to our music. Daddy turned to me. So how was your day, Ladybug? I shrugged. It was all right, except for when Mrs. Fitzgerald said she'd never heard about slaves starting Memorial Day. She said you must be mistaken. Daddy folded the newspaper and set it on the table. I wouldn't expect her to know that. Most white folks don't know our history. Hell, most of us don't even know our history. But that doesn't make it any less true. Mama waved the dish towel, dismissing the history lesson, and said, Why don't you tell your father how you got sent home for fighting in class? 2 girls from the projects to boot. I stopped chewing and searched Daddy's face. Fighting? He said. I waited. He didn't speak, just sat there chewing and nodding his head. And then I saw the hint of a smile tug at his lips. Well, I hope you whooped their asses. Frank, Mama shouted. I did, Daddy. I whooped them real good. I jumped up and started dancing around the kitchen like Muhammad Ali, airboxing and ducking, grateful he wasn't disappointed in me. Evie swung to punch me in the face and I ducked. Then I punched her in the stomach. I even punched her in the face and she didn't even see it coming, just like you taught me. What does she mean, like you taught her? Mama asked. That's my girl, Daddy said, holding his hands out, palm up. I slapped him some skin. Mama frowned, causing Daddy to lean over and kiss her cheek. Sorry, baby, but she was bound to have a fight one day. So that's what you all have been doing out there behind the garage? I knew you were up to no good, teaching her how to fight. How many times do I have to tell you she's not a boy, Frank? Zora. Daddy hated when Mama said that in front of me. I hated it too. Neither of us needed reminding that I was not a boy. That was clear. So to keep from starting an argument, Daddy put on his all jokes aside father face. So, you want to tell me why you were fighting? He asked. From the beginning? I asked. From the beginning. I told him almost everything that happened, except for the part about Dee Dee and me kissing behind the building. When I got to the part about Evie saying she saw Dee Dee and me kissing behind the building, he stopped me. Did she? He asked, not looking up. Did she what? I asked stupidly. He answered with his eyes. I don't know, but it was Dee Dee's idea. She said I needed to get out of my shell and kiss some boys. Why? I didn't get it to play dumb a second time, so I could get a boyfriend. I never did like that fast-tailed girl, Daddy said. I give her a few more years before she's walking around here with her belly poked out and no idea which fella got it that way. Dee Dee isn't like that, Mama said. How in the hell would you know? Mama shut up and went back to eating. Daddy asked me if there was more to the story. I shook my head. And that's why the girl called you a bulldagger? I don't know. I didn't even do nothing to her. Anything, Mama corrected. Anything. Daddy, he raised his eyebrows and answered this time. What's a bulldagger? It's an ugly word people use to describe something they don't understand. This only further confused me. Like what? I asked. Well, people who are that way, he said, and twisted his hand from side to side. What way? Homosexuals. That way. When people of the same sex are attracted to one another. Then how come they call them bulldaggers? Daddy laughed. I don't know. I guess because those kind of women dress and act like men? I laughed this time. That's stupid. Bulls are male. So why would they call women bulldaggers? Good point, Ladybug. Now that I think about it, I don't even know where that name came from. When I was in high school, we suspected our English teacher was that way. She was too damn fine not to have a man at home. She made us read Claude McKay. What was that book? Oh yeah, Home to Harlem. We saw the word for the first time in a song or a poem of something and went something like, and it's ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Can you show me a woman that a man can trust? Something, something, and on like that. Then, and there's two things in Harlem I don't understand. It's a bulldyking woman and a faggoty man. I wonder whatever happened to Miss Jordan. Last I heard, she'd stopped teaching high school and moved up to San Francisco to teach college. Man, we never would have called her a bulldyke. She was a fox. Mama cleared her throat. Not as fine as you, though, baby. But you said bulldyke, I corrected. Yeah, that's what McKay said, but that was almost 30 years ago. I guess the word has evolved over the years. They have a way of doing that, you know. All I know for sure is bulldagger is an ugly word, and I don't want you using it, understand? I nodded, no longer interested in the word itself. I'd heard the word faggot before. It's what some of the boys up on 103rd Street called Ezel. They only said it to see how mad they could make him. He got some mad and cussed them every way to Sunday, using combinations of words that made them laugh hysterically. I wondered if that was why Evie called me a bulldagger. Maybe she was making a joke at my expense. She couldn't think I really like girls. I mean, sure, I liked Dee Dee, and she was the only one. I didn't like other girls. I didn't like boys either. I didn't know what I liked. A thought occurred to me. I can't be a bulldagger anyway, I said. I'm just a girl, not a woman. Thank you.
That was a great reading. Thanks, Claudine. I'm just thinking about questions, and I love that I'm writing all these notes down just so you guys know when we come back together. So let me introduce you to the next reader. This is another excellent author, Mahogany L. Browne. She is a poet, a writer, a curator, and organizer. She is the executive director of Just Media. That is a media literacy initiative designed to support the groundwork of criminal justice leaders and community members. Mahogany L. Browne has received fellowships from Agnes Gund, Air Serenbe, Cave Canem, and more. She is the author of Chlorine Sky, which again has a beautiful cover. Really cool book. It's a novel in verse about an African-American teen dealing with fractured friendships, first romances, and her own empowering coming of age. So Mahogany, thank you so much for being here with us this Sunday afternoon. And I'll pass the baton to you.
Thank you, Christy. And I'm so excited to share space with Glodean and Lyndsey. Such an amazing culmination of work, centering our young people voices, which are so often dismissed, homogenized, and of course, erased. Thinking about Chlorine Sky and the idea that I'm talking from the voice of this, high schooler who knows herself only through the reflection of her being in service to others. I just want to close this reading with something that her cousin Inga would say, which is the motivational speaking that we need every day, right? But especially on this Sunday. So thinking about how you show up for yourself and the ways in which you continue to do so, because it is constant work. I thought it would be best to close the book with some kind of meditative speech. And it begins, Inga says, play smarter. You can't beat everyone. Sure, you may outrun someone, but they always catch up. You can outthink someone, but they'll always catch on. If they box you out, you make a new box. You make them play your game. Think of your team. What are their strengths? What are yours? Now play smart, not small. Think quick, but think good. You have everything you need. Where's the rock? Focus, breathe, sprint, focus, leap, focus, dribble. Where are you? In your head? Nah, you got to be 2 steps ahead of the strongest adversary. Be 2 steps ahead of anyone that tries to put you down because you're a girl. Being a Black girl and a Black girl baller is a whole set of rules you never see coming. Know the rules so you know which ones you need to break. Are you a baller? Then honor the baller. Play your position. Let your team be a team. Let them be their best selves. Your endurance is not your only ability. Your strength is not to run fast or ball the hardest. Your superpower is to see what your team needs and show up for them. Be agile, because you can. You got to keep swinging, little cousin, because you're the real prize. And those that respect you and love you will keep it 100, won't play you small or play you at all. Remember, somebody sees you. Even when the sky looks pitch black and you can't see the outline of your own hands, even when there are so many moving parts and you can't find the man on your team, you're never really alone. See, a real leader knows there is no such thing as a one-person team. If you think there is, you've already lost. Everything is a game. Some folks be playing to win the house. Some folks be playing to win the job. Some folks be playing to win the car. Some folks be playing to win the spotlight. Everything is a game to be won. But some of us are playing for things that last longer than material things. Once you figure out what you're gaming for, then you can play honest and with integrity. If you show up and show the world your real self, you don't have to wait for others to claim you. You don't have to wait for others to pick you. You pick yourself. I mean, really, choose yourself every day. Thank you so much.
That was awesome. And that's perfect for all 3 books. Thank you so much, Mahogany. And it really takes me to my first question. If you all want to pop back in, I would love to get a little discussion going here, get a little Q&A going. So Mahogany, yeah, I love that. I don't know which page that's on, but I love Inga's character. And I had a question about Inga and her relationship with, and please, apologies, I was reading through your book. Your main character's name is Sky, is that right? Okay.
Correct.
And now it's not revealed right away.
Correct. It isn't revealed until the last page, actually.
Yeah, so sorry, that was a spoiler, but I love that technique, and
Thank
it
you.
says a lot about the story itself. But I wanted to talk about the strong relationships, like Sky's relationship with Inga and Justine's relationship with Bev, and then Zayla's relationship with Cynthia. And just thinking, those are really important for these particular characters. And like your reading just said, being able to step out on their own, to find their team, to show up for their team. So I would love to hear from each of you about the importance of those relationships to these young women and young girl and Justine as an older woman, so that the audience knows a little bit more about the books, but the way that relationships play out in those stories. Anybody feel like starting?
I'm practicing not being the first one to go, so I'm gonna let somebody else
It was
go.
like a double Dutch moment. We were like,
Right?
Yeah.
For me, making that the Inga, the cousin bit, which was really the most mature voice, I thought it was important to have a voice that kind of guides the young reader, in this case, the protagonist as well, but not in a way that felt heavy-handed, because kids have enough adults telling them what to do, but it's a rarity where they can see someone who's close enough in age where they don't feel like, you're just going to think I'm whining or something, but someone who's close enough in age for you to like trust that they can remember this feeling, but also old enough to be mature in the things that they're telling you. So I thought it was important to have that kind of voice without it being a parent who was wagging the finger and telling you, get over it, you'll be fine. So yeah, that was for me. What about y'all?
That's interesting. I actually wanted Zayla to have, because Dee Dee was such a crappy friend, I wanted her to have not only a good friend, but also someone who was like her, that she didn't even know was like her until it was, well, I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but Zayla has two characters in her life that help her understand who she is, not from her sexuality, but just as a 12-year-old young Black girl trying to sort it all out. And so Cynthia, this I can say, Zayla and Cynthia meet in charm school because her mother's insisting on making Zayla a girl. But the irony is that Cynthia was in the classroom with Zayla all through, or at least halfway through 6th grade, but was one of those, I'm going to stay in the back of the room and be quiet and not make a disturbance. Where Zayla's like the opposite. So she got a chance to kind of see herself in the mirror of another 12-year-old. Did that make sense?
Yeah. I guess for me, and Christy, maybe you can follow, for this book, for Bone Broth, are you saying the relationship between Miss Myrtle and Justine? Is that what you said?
Well, I said Bev, but you're right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
Bev.
guess, yeah, I mean, Bev and Miss Myrtle play really important parts for Justine. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in Bone Broth sense, and I will say that Justine reminds me a lot, Glodean, of Zora, the mother in your book, because it's like every time when I was reading, I was just like, oh my gosh, like the comparison there was something else. Like Justine is this person that, she's kind of guarded, and has in her mind an idea of what things should look like, or people should look like in terms of image and, other things in that sense. If you read the book, I won't try to give too much away, but her past is what she considers her past. Like she thinks it's, activism and all that hoopla, so to speak, was really what that is, hoopla. Like it was just something that she did as a kid, a little phase that she was going through, and she's trying to grow up, so to speak. But Bev, in a way, and Myrtle, they're literally like, they complement her. Like they're just the opposite. Like they're very, she's kind of soft-spoken, and they're more outspoken, and they're just all about letting it all hang out, so to speak. Whatever comes to mind, whatever, they think to say, then it's just like, that's just who they are. Whereas she's trying to I guess, hide who she is. They do just the opposite, and they kind of show who they are. And so I think they balance each other very well. I mean, in the end, it seems like, without giving too much away, again, Justine does kind of come out of that shell that she kind of made for herself to go back into. Um, but yeah, I think they end up balancing her out very well, or at least that was the intent. So
Yeah, I was thinking too as you were talking about silence before, but first of all, that balance is really important, I think, for any young woman to have that friend who, as you said, compliments her in order. I mean, I think back, and that's the only way I was able to find my way in a certain thing. But um, I also appreciated that, Glodine, you brought up the idea of quiet and silence, and Cynthia sitting in the back of the room. And each of these books touches on that theme of silence, either silence because they choose to be silent, silence because someone is forcing them to be silent, either by action or word or even just feeling. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that, in the sense that, this discussion, it kind of revolves around regional history and how those two things play out in your stories. I was thinking about, when I looked through Salmon Croquettes, there's a part where, it talks about changes in the neighborhood because, like you were reading, people get new money and they want to move out. So it's either people are moving out, or politics empowered money are trying to move in and get rid of whoever's there. And so there's this battle with speaking out and remaining silent, and why and when, and how do you move beyond that? So I don't know, that's kind of a long question, but just opening that up for discussion if you're up for it.
Yeah. Actually, the reason I chose the Watts riots is because they were the most misrepresented in our history. And I lived in Watts, and it was a close-knit community. And so it was kind of like a community forced into silence, because what was once a Black-owned community, they got rid of the Black shop owners and replaced them with white shop owners. And those shop owners treated the community, piss poorly. And then there was this hidden restrictive covenant, right? It was supposedly outlawed, but the California Real Estate um, Bureau or agency um, were still enacting restrictive covenants. So Black people could only live in the Watts area, right? So Frank, the father's choice to stay there wasn't because they couldn't live somewhere else. He just wanted the money to stay in the Black community. And so what I was trying to do is show how Zora was trying to force Zayla into a silence in one aspect, kind of making her feel bad about who she might be, even though her father was trying to love her enough for both of them. It's never enough. You can't replace a mother's love. And then within that kind of forced silence was the silence of the community. Even though they were dealing with what they were forced to live in, because they were a close-knit community, that wasn't as important to them as it was keeping themselves together and keeping what they have. And so when the riots actually, or the uprisings, sparked, that was when the silence was broken. But it took, and that's why I think it was misrepresented, is because people didn't understand that Black people had been dealing with police brutality and abject racism and discrimination in housing, and being forced out of your own business so that a white person could come behind you. They had been dealing with that for almost 2 decades. So it wasn't because it was the hottest day of summer. It wasn't because it was the Black guy got pulled over by the police. It was that in addition to everything else. And so, like with anything, when you silence yourself for so long, when you finally break, you explode, right? So I wanted to show what that looks like. That showing the Watts riots through the eyes of a 12-year-old, showing how silence becomes eruptive, will help people understand why we uprise. Because I just got to say this. Riot was a word that was used to describe what the Jim Crow and white supremacists did in Black communities. When they came in and destroyed our communities, that was called a riot. and they flip that word that was used, something that was used against us, to define what we do. And I think there should be a clear distinction between what happens when it's a riot, which is when it's done to us, as opposed to an uprising when we do it in defense of ourselves or speaking out against injustice. That was a long answer, but I hope that helped.
No, that was great. Like, I guess just to piggyback off that, in terms of, like you mentioned how the silence of a whole community. In terms of Bone Broth, I think that's exactly why I made Justine the way she is. Because Justine isn't a person, right? She's a personification of this area. She's a personification of what I saw, growing up in St. Louis a lot of times, is a whole community being silenced and stifled, and like you said, after a while, you get to that boiling point. And I guess what I was trying to express in this book was she grew up in Pruitt-Igoe, which, if you know the history of Pruitt-Igoe housing project, it was a segregated housing project that started out, in the 1950s or whatnot. And there were blacks and whites, but eventually, because of white flight, the whites moved away, which it happens in so many cities. And Justine and her deceased husband decide that they want to basically move out. So they move away. And it's this whole thing about just, being silent. Let's play nice with, the world, so to speak. And so she literally silences herself. And so that's basically where that comes from. I just think that's a great way that you explained it, because in all of that, with her past, the reason why I decided to have the backdrop be Ferguson is because of that. Like, Ferguson did just happen because, everybody thought, oh, wow, we didn't know this was going on in St. Louis. Like, how come you guys acted so crazy when Michael Browne happened? It's just like, where did that come from?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it's just like, no, I wanted to say, like you were saying, like, it didn't just start with Ferguson. This was, a build up of events, and stuff happens, and it's just like, it's kind of pushed under the rug until it just can't be anymore. So, yeah.
And I think I love both of those answers. I think what happens in Chlorine Sky is you get to see the intergenerational heirloom of silence, how silence is used in Black communities as a form of protection, especially for young Black girls, Black femme. It's normalized, right? But also when we're thinking about age and ageism, I was raised under the rule, children should be seen and not heard. And what happens in those moments of silence is what Chlorine Sky is trying to investigate.
Nice.
Yes.
I really love that all these books have such strong ties together in just the way they're approaching your stories and the themes that keep popping up. It's really beautiful. Glodean, did you want to say something before I?
No, I was just gonna say that I was also raised with the children should be seen and not heard. We didn't get in grown folks conversations.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
why are you laughing?
Exactly.
Like, you're laughing. No.
Right.
We're grown. You're like, oh.
Right. Stay at the little kids' table.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I guess another question I have for the three of you, I'm curious how writing about these women and these young girls and this young teenager changed you as a woman writer. Is there anything, once you, as you were exploring that story, once you got through that story, often we write a book and it changes us no matter what, somehow. So is there any aspect of that writing about those main characters left you in a different way?
Well, I think a lot of, from what I've heard in the past of people who've read Bone Broth, it's something I didn't know really stuck out was the grieving process and how grieving looks different for everybody. And so Justine is grieving, which is most obvious because she just lost her husband, but her children, her 3 grown children, are grieving in other ways. The city's grieving because of the backdrop. It's just a lot of grieving. And I guess that changed me in the fact that I didn't even realize that that's what, I mean, I hate that, but it's like, I guess when you're writing it, you're so close to it, you don't see it. And so it just really helped me honor the fact that people grieve in different ways.
Glodean, you have the best almost face. It's so, what are we doing?
I'm practicing on not being the first one to jump in.
I'm gonna go. That's just amazing.
It's on my face though that I want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, you should go.
I should work on my face then. No.
No, it's good.
No.
It's exciting for us. I'm like, what's she gonna say? It's gonna be good.
Say it.
I was gonna say that the things that people took out of the book aren't even things that I expected. My intention was to write a story about a girl struggling with her sexuality, to bring visibility to homosexuality so that it's not considered a choice. So everything that I did in the book was to take away all stereotypes that can either drive the narrative about why Black people behave the way they do, or about homosexuality. So she wasn't molested. She didn't have she has a 2-parent household. Community loves her. She's got the support. She lives in the children should be seen and not heard era. But it's funny that in the face of all that, and I think people recognize that, I think they notice that this isn't that stereotypical story. So you have to deal with what you're looking at. So I would say that I think that it changed me just from the standpoint that I had the courage to put this story out the way that I, in a way that was careful to honor who we are as Black people beneath all the stereotypes. Because when you hear our stories, you typically see us in some level of struggle, right? And even though the characters were struggling with something, it wasn't the first thing that you deal with. What you first see is love. And I think that while I didn't intend for that, I mean, I didn't try not to show that, but what people are taking from it just makes me feel like what has changed me the most is that I had the courage to tell this particular story that honors us in a way that's different than what we're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm. And I think I learned that vulnerability authenticates text in a way that performance relies on, right? If I perform a poem with a certain, breath or timbre, I know that it will evoke this kind of emotion. Whereas the story on the page, I have to make sure I'm creating this landscape of trust so that the readers don't engage with it as like, this is not, one, why are you lying? Two, why are you trying to make me cry? Like all those things that readers are fully aware of when they're being manipulated on the page. You kind of like, there's ways to get away with that, I think, when you perform, and you can't hide behind performance on the page. So I was mindful of that, and I really came to terms with the power of just really clean lines, honest voices, even if the voice is of deception. Like, how do we honor that moment so that the reader can experience the story? Also, I was more interested in writing a story about friendship loss because I don't think that we look at friendship, those fractured friendships, with the same power. Like they have the same power as a romantic breakup, right? We don't realize how impactful it is until you're old enough to articulate, oh, that really hurt me. And now I'm moving through the world wounded, right? I'm moving through the world abandoned. And I can't make friends the same way I could when I was in 4th grade, 9th grade, 11th grade. Why is that? All of that is tied into, the intimacies, and intimate relationships are not just romantic. And I wanted to finally have some language for young people to just be honest about, oh, this hurt me. This was like a family member. And now I have to mourn that it may not be the same. So those are the two things that really tethered me to this project being received well, but also like, who am I when it's over? I walked away understanding very clearly friendships are a very large part of my makeup.
Yeah, I love all those answers. They're so true. that kind of leads me to just asking a little bit. We're kind of getting towards the end of the hour. If you want to share very briefly about the project that you're working on now as these books are done, and then I'm going to send in the chat, Mahogany, a page that I wonder if you'd be willing to read as we close out. But Glodean, I know you don't like to go first. You're trying to hang back, but I'm going to
I
call
was
on you
trying to
first.
make myself.
Just go ahead and share with us what this projects that you're working on next.
Well, ironically, I'm working on the sequel to Zayla's story. It's the love story. Like first you had to accept the homosexuality, now it's the love story. But I recently met my birth family, and two book ideas came from that. So I don't know how I'm gonna have to make a choice on which one I'm gonna focus on. But I want to write a story about my birth mother and my adoptive mother and their lives paralleling for the love of a child. And then I also want to write the story fictionalized about my father's side of the story, because my father found out that my mother was pregnant, and then he didn't see her over the summer. And when he saw her again, he was like, "Where's the baby?" And she said, "I gave it away." So because we have so much history of Black men getting that label of walking away from their families when it's steeped in kind of slavery, kids being taken away and sold away. So I don't know if did you guys read Family, J. California Cooper? If you haven't, you should read it. It's an awesome book, and it's told from an ancestor's point of view. It's a first person point of view until that person dies, and then she continues the story from the spirit world. And so I want to tell a generational story of men having their children taken away, and that my father decides that he's going to break that generational trauma and fight to get the child that was taken away from him, so that we can see that not all men walk away from their children. So I don't know which one I'm going to work on next. They kind of all get worked on as I get ideas.
Wow, that's awesome. I can't wait to read that. Both of them, both projects. It's because, they both seem to defy the stereotypes. So I think that's great. Yeah. I guess for me, I'm a horror nut. So I like horror and anything to do with thrillers. And I think it's time to get back in that vein. And so I'm working on a short story collection of intergenerational horrors. It still centers Black women and Black girls. It's a range. Like I think the youngest was 10, and then the oldest has been in her 50s. So, but they all, that's the common theme is it all has to do with some kind of horror or supernatural or thriller. Has that kind of bent with a little social commentary, but that's not the center.
Ooh, okay, so I just actually turned in Vinyl Moon, which is my second YA novel. It is a hybrid, so it's verse, prose, text message, some pigeon mail, all of it, all kinds of writing surrounds and makes up this story that focuses on Angel. If you read Chlorine Sky, Angel shows up as the girl that lately feels is like competition. But there's a moment where you see Angel coming into this relationship that is toxic and abusive, and this is her story. And I also just started my third YA novel because I turned those edits in, done, boom. But then I'm here at a residency now called Baldwin for the Arts, and I'm working on my third YA novel, which is called Epicenter, and it focuses on COVID-19 as the protagonist and antagonist in a story that takes place in New York City. So a little bit of everything is happening. I do understand completely, Glodean. You're like, which one am I going to do? Sometimes you don't even have a choice. You just got to wait for it to tell you what it wants you to do, is what I'm learning.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing about all these different projects. I think it's really great, Lyndsey, that you're moving in different directions. I think it's easy as a novelist to get stuck in one genre or whatever as a writer to get stuck. And Glodean and Mahogany, I love hearing that you're continuing to address those younger audiences. Those are always fun books to read. I love YA books, middle grade books, all of those. Well, we're at 3 o'clock, and I really have enjoyed this discussion. I wish it could have been in person. It's so nice to be able to connect online, but I do understand, especially as summer rolls out, people they just want to be in that physical space with others. So I would have loved to do this in person, and I hope that at some point we can all see each other in person. But thank you for taking the time out today to share your stories, to share your ideas and the things that are coming up down the line. I just wanted to close, I think, Mahogany in Chlorine Sky, there is another short excerpt that really speaks again to the message that's been throughout this whole reading, and I wanted to ask her to close with that. And yeah, and then just say, everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the recording. And I hope you will check out all 3 books, Bone Broth, Salmon Croquettes, and then Chlorine Sky. Thanks so much.
I'm going to give you the edited version. Who you playing small for? Inga asked me, who you playing small for? And I pretend I don't know what she's talking about. Play D. Lil, what did I teach you? Inga calling me Lil tells me I'm someone's sister. Inga calling me Lil shows me I'm not out here on my own, and everything I do means something to someone else. And just like that, I begin to play for keeps. On the court, there is no mercy. I'm a baller, and I don't care who is bothered by all the space I take up.
Nice.
Take up space.
Yeah,
Pew, pew,
thank
pew.
you. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank
Goodbye to
you.
all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Happy book release,
Bye.
Lyndsey.
Happy
Congrats.
book release. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.